It was the last day of the dry season, and the village was covered in thick dust. The air was heavy with the weight of the unrelenting heat, and the earth, cracked and barren. I had never seen the two of them, Amora and Chijioke, so desperate. They had always carried themselves with quiet dignity, despite their poverty, but now, their faces were heavy with worry. They went through a lot of challenges just to cater for their needs, especially to feed. Chijioke and Amora used to carry heavy bundles of firewood through a dry, cracked landscape. With their faces tired and weathered, with Amora visible exhausted but determined to keep going, Chijioke always struggled to get few items in the form of fruits and vegetables to sell at the village market, together with his pregnant wife standing nearby, holding her belly and looking worried, as they struggled to make enough money to feed themselves. They sat side by side in front of their small hut, their eyes distant, as if searching for something or anything to cling to. They were the poorest couple in our village, but they had something more precious than money: each other. But that morning, their hope was crushed. I was sitting near the large palm tree at the edge of the village, minding my own business, when I overheard their conversation. It felt like eavesdropping, but I couldn't pull away. Chijioke's voice was soft, almost broken. "Amora, how will we survive now? The last of our savings are gone. I don't know how to feed you, or the baby that is coming. How do I face my ancestors knowing I can't provide for you?" Amora, her eyes tired but filled with a love that seemed unshakable, took his hand in hers, her touch gentle as if trying to soothe him, and whispered, "We will make it, Chijioke. We have to. We've been through worse, and yet here we are. Don't lose hope." But I saw the fear in her eyes too, a fear that made my chest tighten. It was the kind of fear that told me this time was different. They had been struggling for months. Since the rains had stopped, their crops had failed, and with every passing day, their situation had worsened. The market was empty, with only a handful of withered vegetables and the occasional piece of dried fish left to trade. The once fertile land, the lifeblood of our village, had turned to dust. I had seen the farmers try to work the fields, but it was as if the earth itself had given up. As the days stretched into weeks, their struggle became more desperate. Amora would sit by the river for hours, her eyes fixed on the still water, her face as blank as the land around us. Sometimes, she would dip her hands into the river, as though the coolness of the water might bring her comfort or answers. But nothing could ease the growing dread that settled like a stone in my stomach. Chijioke, ever the provider, would walk for hours to the nearest town, hoping to sell whatever little goods he could manage. Sometimes, it was dried herbs, sometimes small trinkets he had carved himself, but always, he returned empty-handed. I could see the weight of defeat in his shoulders, his once strong gait now slower, dragging as if every step was an effort. Amora, the only precious gift left for Chijioke, became ill. What would be left of this poor innocent Chijioke? He was more confused than a man who lost all in life, sadness written all over him. This poor concerned Chijioke sat beside his pregnant wife, who is lying on a straw mat inside their humble home. The woman looks pale and weak, clutching her stomach in pain. The man holds her hand, tears in his eyes, unsure of what to do next. Hopefully Amora, Chijioke's sunshine, got a bit better, and as Chijioke decided to go into the forest, she didn't hesitate to follow him. She was stopped by her dear husband, but she insisted going along with him. The love they share wasn't something words can really explain. There's this warm feeling that they have that things will get better once hope is there. One morning, as I walked through the village on my way to fetch water, I saw Chijioke sitting outside their hut, alone. His head was buried in his hands, his body shaking with silent sobs. My heart skipped a beat, and I hurried toward him. I asked him what had happened, but he didn't answer. His gaze was fixed on the ground. And when he finally looked up, his eyes were hollow, lost. He pointed, wordlessly, toward Amora, who lay motionless on the ground. I froze, my blood turning cold. Amora was gone. Her body, so small and frail, was still, and there was a faint pallor to her skin that I had never seen before. She had passed in the night, her tired body unable to hold on any longer. The hunger, the exhaustion, the crushing weight of it all had claimed her. It didn't seem real. How could it? How could someone like Amora, so full of light, so full of life, be gone? Chijioke didn't cry at first. He just stared at her, his face frozen in disbelief. The tears came later, and when they did, they came in floods. He cradled her lifeless hand in his, shaking, as he kept asking, "Why her? Why my Amora?" His voice broke with each word, and it felt as though the very ground beneath us was mourning her loss. It was the hardest thing I had ever witnessed, seeing someone so full of love, so full of life, be taken away. And yet, there was nothing I could do. None of us could do anything. I had seen it in the eyes of others in the village, that same helplessness. We were all powerless in the face of a force far beyond our control. The village gathered to bury her later that afternoon. We dug a small grave near the river, the same place where Amora had spent so many quiet moments. The earth was dry and cracked, just like the land that had failed her. As we lowered her body into the ground, the sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the dusty village. It felt like the end of everything, as if her death marked the death of hope for all of us. Chijioke stood by the grave, his face blank, empty. He never spoke again, not to anyone. In the days that followed, I watched him from a distance. He moved through the village like a man who had already lost everything. He had always been strong, a pillar for Amora. But now he was hollow. His eyes, once bright with love and determination, were dull and lifeless. There was no more fighting spirit left in him. It was as if the life had been drained out of him, and in its place was nothing but grief. The rains came back the following year, but for Chijioke, it was too late. The village began to bloom again, the crops grew tall and green, and the river swelled with life. But for Chijioke, the world had turned to dust. I don't know where he went after that. Some say he wandered into the forest, still carrying the grief of losing his love. Others say he left in search of something, anything, that might ease the pain. But no one ever saw him again. The village, once full of hope and laughter, had lost something that could never be replaced. The land could grow crops again, the river could run clear, but nothing could bring back Amora. And nothing could bring back the man Chijioke had been before the hunger, before the death that took her from him. As for me, I never forgot that look in his eyes, the look of a man who had lost everything. I never forgot the way he held her hand one last time, as if holding on to the only thing that ever truly mattered. And as I sit by the river now, watching the water flow endlessly, I think of them. I think of Amora, of her quiet strength, of the way she loved so fiercely. And I think of Chijioke, a man broken by the loss of the one person who had made life worth living.